been some. What I'm getting at is that the compartmentalization of education has led to the idea that you can know everything about some small area, and that makes you like the king of reason and makes you super rational, but you don't know how to connect your niche to other areas of thinking. And really that was the whole idea of the university, as it comes out of the early and late Middle Ages, was a universe, right? It was the idea that all the sciences and all of the legitimate areas of research, the trivium and the quadrivium, and how to approach the world, they're all under God. They're all one way of approaching different areas of life, and they all cohere and they make sense because of being under God. And then what we have after secularization of the French Revolution and the Enlightenment, all these things, is the breakdown not just of the social order but also of pedagogy, to where it becomes extremely hyper focused. Again, I'm not saying you can't be focused on some niche or some specific area that you want to be focused on. Nothing wrong with it. The point though is that the person who would study biology would have had in a classical education logic. So they would have been able to understand that when Aristotle, for example, looked at the natural world, and when he wrote about logic, he saw it as something operant in the world, as did Plato, as did any of the classical greats of Western civilization. The church fathers looked at the world and they saw logic and these classical educational principles as things operant in nature and in the world, right? Music, geometry, all of these things tied together because they were all related to things like mathematics, which reflect the divine mind.
Yes. God ever arithmetizes. Yes. So yeah, I think another kind of thing that happened at the same time is the kind of attitude of hostility that emerged between academics and the whole lay culture. I think that cohesion evaporated around the same time, and so now I think there's a lot of elitism and there's a lot of hostility, whereas I think there is a view to be taken where all knowledge is kind of part of the same organism, and the intelligentsia and everyone else, including people doing essential work and the religious clergy, they're all part of the same organism of a functioning, healthy society. Now I think everyone, there's so much hostility and elitism that's part of everyone just kind of putting themselves in their little niches.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the physicist and the biologist has the immediate assumption that they have the primacy when it comes to truth. That physicalism and biology, basically the so-called life sciences, basically just that's as high as you could go in trying to understand or explain the world. There's no other. What else could you appeal to? There's only science and direct empiricism. And again, it's amazing how many of the people in those disciplines have never even thought of the question of whether something like naive empiricism is true or false or defensible, right? The very idea of we can only know what's immediately presentable to our senses is so absurd and so self refuting that you would think that people who
someone would notice the disconnect. Yeah.
But that's the thing, is that it's not ultimately just a question of intellect or IQ or people having a lack of facts. In my theological perspective, my philosophy, the root of man's problem is ethical. It's his own essential egoism and pride that keeps him from discovering the truth and making those kinds of connections. So it's actually man's will that limits himself by accepting things like atheism. And that's what's so ironic, is that atheism is the most imprisoning, materialism is the most imprisoning box to put yourself in the midst of you thinking that you are gaining this great liberation or this great freedom. Yes.
And I mean, I wrote some stuff out here, but that is what makes the kind of Pied Pipering of people into atheism so perverse, really, is that they're being sold one thing, and of course they're getting the exact opposite. So I mean, this was like well, like the things I've written out beforehand is who is well, let me just backtrack, because like the guy I always talk with, Max Kolbe, Escaping Atheism, we agree on certain things and we disagree on other things. But what is apparent to both of us is that there has been a concerted effort to foist atheism upon the public, especially in the
Yes.
post 9/11 world. We disagree on who exactly is doing it and why and how, but we agree that there are some higher ups who are responsible for this kind of
Oh,
propaganda.
absolutely. Yeah, I've it's been a kind of working theory in my mind that modern atheism for a long time has especially come out of the Royal Society. I mean, this is where we can trace the history of, well, I mean, this is kind of like the so-called global elite of academia out of Oxford,
Yeah.
Cambridge, and certainly, New York universities and California universities, the East Coast, West Coast, and the UK Royal Society. But really, modern atheism has its birth not even in the French Revolution, but in Anglo philosophers and thinkers at the same time as the French Revolution. And some people theorize that it was actually English and Scottish atheism that maybe propelled the atheism of the philosophes in the French Revolution, or maybe it was vice versa. But I really think we continually come back to English Anglo pragmatism and atheism, and there is a Jewish element to that atheism as well. And I think that there's also an elite social strategy approach of promoting atheism, and that's why you see the big pop star atheists, they're promoted so heavily, not just because they're some great debater or because they have some amazing high IQ or intellect. They're promoted because they're useful to where the social engineers want to take us.
Yes. Well, I mean, that was like the great irony I noticed, because when you think about academia in the last 40, 50 years, you see it. Think of it as being dominated by continental philosophers who are postmodern,
Yeah.
post-structuralist, and post-colonialist, and just post everything. And now here you have a guy like Richard Dawkins, who is this fusty throwback to the 19th century. I think aren't his family like African colonizers or something? That is how non-post-colonial he is. So he is entirely a 19th century throwback.
Yes.
And it's very disconcerting. It's like the people who I think would be in the job of promoting him, I think they would have gone to the best universities. They would have been steeped in this kind of continental philosophy. So if they're going to promote a guy like Dawkins, I would think it would be entirely for cynical reasons. It's like this is the gruel we're going to ladle out for the plebes, because it will get them to where we want them to be, not because we actually believe that there's a whole lot to what Dawkins says. There's really not anything to what he says.
Yeah,
but he's useful to our ends.
Yeah, I mean, I have several works here that actually vindicate that in a very academic, historical way. For example, I have Albert Pike's entire Morals and Dogma. I've read a very large amount of the book. And what you have in Morals and Dogma, which is kind of one of the Bibles of Freemasonry, is this atheistic approach to using all different kinds of philosophies and worldviews to manipulate different strata of society. So it's essentially a giant social engineering manual that uses religious symbology and has a layer of atheism. And of course, if you want to argue that above the atheists there's a layer of Luciferians, that's fine with me. That's probably true. But the funny thing about Morals and Dogma is that the whole treatise is basically supposedly about man's liberation from all dogma and religious indoctrination. And the book's called Morals and Dogma. That you have to believe. So there's a fundamental absurdity and contradiction in this. And then you say, well, now why does that matter? Well, Freemasonry has been an institution that's been global for several centuries that has promoted atheism as a revolutionary philosophy. They promoted all kinds of leftist liberation, atheism, feminism, Marxism. They promoted all these movements globally because of their revolutionary power. And guess where modern Masonry is based? The Lodge of England. It's directly out of the UK. I actually went to the UK about 3 weeks ago, so I got to see all the Masonic stuff everywhere. And what it functioned as, and this is very crucial to what you mentioned with Dawkins. There's a point to all this. What Freemasonry functioned as was a giant kind of spy network for the British Empire. I have a book that's actually been written by a famous academic that's on that very point of the Masonic lodges throughout the British Empire being basically an extended spy network for the Queen.
Yeah.
So this isn't even a conspiracy theory. It's just mainline historians write books about it, but people don't know about it. Now,